Absolutely.
Dive right in. All right. Well, thanks, Victor, for arranging all of this, first of all, and welcome, panelists. So we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Mark Kapczynski. I run a local business and marketing strategy firm here in Los Angeles, and I'll be your moderator for the panel discussion today. Today's topic is the Immersive Media Leadership Think Tank, focusing on AR, VR, XR. And we have three great panelists with us today, and I'm going to kind of cover on just how we're going to do logistics for today first, and then we'll get everyone introduced. But if for the audience and those participating, a couple quick things. One, we'd love to know who you are a little bit. So if you do have an opportunity to type into the chat window, like a little bit about either your role, like are you in marketing, or are you a technology person, or are you running a startup, or what your interests are in terms of your background with our topic and panel would be great and helpful, so that our panelists can kind of tailor their answers accordingly. Also, for those attending, if you have any questions, we're going to take overall questions as a group at the end of the session. So we'll start out where the panelists will introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about their backgrounds and their bios, and then we'll get into a Q&A session, for good solid, call it 45 minutes, and then we'll save the last 10-15 minutes of the session for audience questions. And so what I'll do is, if you do have questions, feel free to just type them into the chat window. I'll kind of keep monitoring them and try to roll them up into some common themes that we can bring up either throughout the session or certainly at the very end. And if you do have an interest and you want to ask a specific question of one of the panelists while we're going, you can type it into the chat window, but please just address it to the specific person. So if it's for Michael, Leslie, or Raphael, I just say like for Michael, and in between him answering questions, he'll try to or the ladies, they'll all try to answer the chat questions as well. But please do understand that we're trying to do this panel and focus there, and then we'll try to get to as many questions as we can as we go along. All right, so with all of that hopefully out of the way, I want to have the panelists introduce themselves. So we have Rafaela, we have Leslie, and Michael today. Rafaela, I'm going to ask you to go first, and then Leslie and Michael. And so, Rafaela, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, what you're working on right now? And we'd love to learn about you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, and hello, everyone. Coming to you from Santa Monica, just like Mark, we were saying that. I'm originally from Italy. I might have a little bit of a different background from maybe most in the tech industry or emerging tech industry. I come from music. So I'm originally a pianist. I came to the US, to LA, with a scholarship for a master's in piano performance. Then did my MBA, and always stayed in everything that was emerging technology, either from an advertising perspective or from a more business-oriented perspective. Since then, I always found that emerging technology requires a different mix of skill sets that go from entertainment to art, to others. And I don't know if you guys can see me, but my screen is locked at the moment, or at least my video is locked. But
we can definitely hear you. So it's the video is maybe just a little bit off, but keep going and tell us a little bit more about you, and hopefully the video will catch up or so on.
No problem. So I started working in AR and VR in 2010. At the very, very beginning of that, and joined Accenture about 3.5 years ago. Accenture was looking at, and is still looking at, XR as one of the key emerging technologies that our clients will need to use in order to be able to compete in the post-digital era. So we invested early on to create a global practice with 300 plus people worldwide. And we really look at creating solutions across the enterprise and commercial or consumer space. So anything from connected worker type of solutions, so how to help workers perform their actions in the field by themselves, to immersive learning, to research, virtual research, to anything that has to do with commerce, marketing, or collaboration these days.
Great, terrific. Well, it sounds like a big team. If you have over 300 people dedicated into just this one space, that sounds great. So we'll love to obviously learn a lot more about that as we go along. Leslie, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Yeah, sure. So like Rafaela, I come from an unusual background for the tech industry. I have my undergraduate degrees were in neuroanatomy and the history of art. And so after that, after I got out of graduate school, kind of the only thing left for me to do was to go on Jeopardy, which I did, and I won. I was a 5-game undefeated winner on Jeopardy back in the 90s. And as a result of that, I got job offers. I got 15 different job offers.
Wow.
Alex Trebek said that, oh, I hear you're just out of graduate school and you're unemployed. I'm like, why, Alex? Yes, I am. And so I got all these job offers and ended up in the tech industry. I ended up in the mobile phone industry, which was the hot new industry of the time. And then I eventually started working for Nokia back in 2000. And so I'm now located in the Bay Area. I'm Nokia's head of trend scouting. And so because and I need to say a couple of words about Nokia, because we've got this terrible brand problem. Everybody knows us for the thing that we don't do anymore. So yes, we used to make phones, but we sold that business to Microsoft. We do not make those phones anymore. And but Nokia is a 155-year-old company. We had our birthday actually just a couple days ago. And what we still do that we were doing back in the handset heyday is that we make the networks. We make the network equipment that we sell to the phone companies. So Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, they buy base stations from us and then they put them up on the masts. And so, we make the networks. And we also have fixed, and we also have, just all the different network things. And so the reason that my job exists and the reason that I'm in the Bay Area is that, I've always been on the network side, but yeah, I lived through that roller coaster of, yay, we're the top of the world. We're all these excellent positive case studies in Harvard Business Review about being an excellent company. And then bam, we're now the bad news story for Harvard Business Review because of what happened on the mobile phone side. We in networks have always been just humming along just fine. But we did learn from that. One of the reasons that the mobile phone side of the company lost its predominance in the industry is that we were only looking inside the telco industry for learnings, for competition, for anything. And the company that came and took the mobile phones out came from the computer industry. And we were not paying any attention to that. And so my job here is to be looking outside the telecommunications world at the things that could possibly come and maybe threaten our business, but also what are the opportunities. And so the phone companies of the world are our customers. And so part of my role is to understand the new technologies that are coming, AR, VR, MR, and lots more actually, and then to tell the phone companies of the world about these technologies that are coming so they can start building their networks now for these things that will need to be supported in the future. And so I've got this great job. It's a ton of fun, but I'm really, really, really passionate about AR and VR and just everything that you can do with it. I've got a Vive. I've got a I've got a Quest. I'm like in VR almost more than I'm out of it. Yeah, there you go.
Hey, so I know there was a particular question that you wanted me to bring up for you. Do you want to address it now, or do you want to table it for later?
Okay. Okay. Go ahead and ask our candidate.
You want me to ask it? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead and ask it.
So as a consumer, I'm really concerned about 5G. Is 5G going to kill me?
Right. Let me answer that. Okay. So
was that teed up good enough for you?
Yeah, that was perfect. Okay, the short answer, no. No. But let me give you a little bit of why around the no so you can explain it to somebody else if, because that's always good. Basically, the world of spectrum, there are many different spectrum bands. And in the past, analog TV was in one of the bands and the military communicates in another band and all this kind of stuff. And when mobile first started, 2G was in a particular set of bands, and then 3G was in a particular set of other bands. And each time we had a new G, we had to find new places to put where spectrum was empty in enough countries around the world that it would make sense to put these things. Well, 5G is different. It is not in limited bands. It can go in any spectrum band of the entire radio spectrum that's usable for mobile communications. And so there's no such thing as 5G. It really depends on which spectrum band you're in. Okay, so having said that, there's low spectrum, which is the stuff that's kind of long, low bandwidths that will go through. They're not very powerful, but they'll go a long distance and they'll go through walls and stuff. So you can get good indoor coverage with that kind of thing. And we've already seen those kinds of things in 2G and some of the other Gs. But then we have high spectrum, and this is the stuff that people are a little bit worried about, because this is actually super high spectrum called millimeter wave that nobody's used before. Nobody's actually been doing mobile communications in these bands before. All right. Here's the thing. The frequency is so high, it travels not very far, and it can't penetrate anything. If there is a leaf in front of the base station, the 5G is not going to go through it. It cannot go through skin, for starters. So it is so fragile. I am now protected from 5G. In fact, it's a real problem because it's only line of sight, and I mean line of sight. Yeah. So yeah. No, 5G is either the same bands you know and love from before, or it's something that is so fragile and weak that it's really best used for kind of indoor industrial kinds of things.
It does cause COVID-19, correct?
Sorry, say that again. Oh, and it does not cause COVID-19. Right. We've been working with 5G for many years already. And none of us died of COVID-19. Right. Okay. Great. So thank you. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Leslie. Okay. Appreciate that. I feel better now.
Yeah.
All right. Michael, sorry. Last but certainly not least, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. You have an extensive background in this space. So.
Okay. So I guess I'll just sort of go along with the theme of you guys in that my background is also unique in tech, although apparently not. I got my degree from UCLA in musical theater. There we go. And I always thought
I'm a brand too.
Similar to Rafael, I came from a musical background. And I too, similar to Leslie, came in through mobile. So my first job in tech was at HTC. And then I moved to Samsung. And then I moved to the mothership Google. I started working at HTC around the time the first smartphones with Android came out. They built the first one, the Dream, if anybody remembers, right around the time the first Apple iPhone came out. And then I moved to IBM from Google, and then from there I took a job at Bose. But other through lines of my career are I started on developer platforms, so I was a developer advocate at HTC. Moved to developer marketing, worked my way up to head of developer marketing at Samsung. Ran the first Samsung Developers Conference. Then moved into marketing at Google for a product called Google Play for Education, which has been sunsetted and rolled into Chrome for Education, which was the right call. And then I got really curious about both product management and artificial intelligence. IBM offered me both opportunities, so I moved there, worked my way up to director of product for a team I started called Watson Developer Labs, building products for developers on top of the Watson Developer Cloud suite of services. That's where I really got interested in immersive technologies. I got a demo from some of my ex-colleagues at HTC about the Vive before it came out in early 2016. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is the future. And I could immediately see a number of non-gaming future of work, sort of new computing paradigm use cases for the platform. And I wanted to really make my career about that. I very briefly thought I was going to become the chief product officer at a startup for augmented reality. It didn't end up working out that way, and I ended up moving my family away from the Bay Area where I had moved when I was living in Los Angeles, which is where I went to school, and then we moved up to the Bay Area to work in tech, and then I moved to Austin about a year and a half ago. We had this house built, which was very fortunate for us given the quarantine of it all. A little more space to stretch, so we can't complain. And ended up taking a job at Bose, working not just on augmented reality, but on this weird new sort of audio-focused augmented reality platform. And very recently, I exited in March, and I am working on something in stealth currently. Yeah, so my passion for AR, VR, and I've sort of been on the speaking circuit for a long time, giving talks with some folks on this panel, Rafael among them, in the space of XR. And yeah, very fascinated. I think now is a very interesting time for immersive technologies. A lot of opportunities opening up. I'm worried in particular about the hype cycle going too far up again. But I do think that now is an interesting moment where certainly a lot of moves are being made, and the groundwork for really pushing this forward as a present day computing paradigm along the lines of Facebook's efforts as well with Oculus Quest are happening. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, welcome all three of you again. So what I'd love to be able to do is, I think, Michael, you even kind of picked up on it just in some of your last comments, but where I'd love to start our discussion with all three of you, kind of getting each of your points of view on this topic is just, it's to me, it's the elephant in the room. It's like, what's the state of AR, VR, XR in light of everything that we're going through with COVID-19 and being all work from home and really all these environments changing on us so immediately. And I moderated a similar session, I think I mentioned, during CES, and the big talk with AR, VR, XR was about, these great interactive experiences and places where I could go to experience it and, pay for a game type of session, almost like an arcade. And, it seems like, okay, we've had to kind of pull back from some of those kind of live interactive experiences, obviously. And so, did that hurt things? Is it just pump the brakes and pause things for us? But I'd love each of your takes on the state of XR within the COVID-19 lens. And so, Rafaela, can I start with you, and then we'll go to Leslie and Michael again, and then we'll kind of dive around topic-wise from there.
Of course. From our standpoint, it has accelerated things. So I think we had already seen, and I think it's important to remember that XR is being used and has been used now for years, not only on the consumer side of the house, but also within enterprises for anything that might have to do with production, design, learning, as I was mentioning before, manufacturing, so on and so forth. What's been happening has pushed everyone to try to go faster and make sure that there are different ways to collaborate. You might have seen Spatial just 4 days ago launching their virtual collaboration application for free for everyone, and it's available across platform from the web to VR. And I was hearing from them that 50% of their traffic came from the past 4 days compared to 2.5 years of being in business. So certainly collaboration and finding new ways of working that way. Anything that has to do with providing self-help or help remotely, if you go off of the fact that people cannot access certain spaces. Before, it was more of a matter of, can we decrease costs? Can we make things more efficient by not having everyone go to a specific physical space? Now you literally cannot go to certain specific places. That could be an office, it could be a manufacturing facility, it could be a variety of different things. So can you do some of those same things virtually? And that could be anything from receiving help when you're on the manufacturing floor, or doing training and recreating situations that you cannot access. And then on the other side, anything that has to do with research, doing customer research, figuring out what customers want or don't want in a physical environment. Well, you cannot test them anymore in physical environments. Can you recreate those physical environments now virtually and get the same data, or actually better data, because now you have biometrics that you can collect from them and move things along. And all the way out to, if you think about retail or reaching consumers, there is certainly an even greater push towards switching to 3D assets for anything that a company might produce, from the times that they're trying to design and prototype something and test it, all the way to catalogs. If you look at IKEA, I believe they switched to full 3D assets when it comes to their catalogs, and they've seen an increase in revenue of 30%.
Wow.
Because all of a sudden you can modify them, you can change them, you can use those same assets across the full spectrum of activities that you do, that could be anything, again, from testing, but it could be, you can use that same 3D asset now for an AR lens that you might want to use. You can do immersive experiences, but you can also sell or have people be able to manipulate or configure products from the safety of their homes without having to go, for example, to look at the car. They can configure the car directly in AR at home. So we certainly see this as a positive and as an acceleration in that sense.
Yeah. That's interesting. So so maybe maybe the takeaway for that is almost like maybe the live event type of stuff is obviously going away, where you go to a venue to experience this, but now more and more of that's coming to the home, so that consumers can now experience things that they normally couldn't have, I guess, or no, given the work from home environment. Leslie, what do you think about all this? What's your kind of point of view around what's happening and the impact on AR, VR, XR in light of COVID-19?
I think one of the sad things is that we're a little too early in terms of hardware and hardware distribution. If we were, say, I don't know, a year later, then more people might have, say, VR headsets at home. It's quite telling. We're here talking about an XR thing, and we're meeting over this laptop-based thing. We're not meeting in VR because not enough people have the VR headsets at home. That's just a reality. So the timing of this is unfortunate, and it's kind of caught us just a moment before the hardware is really quite widespread. But one of the good things, and I've actually been telling the phone companies for the last couple of years, when we actually start getting into mixed reality, one of the really key things that's going to happen is people are going to realize that you don't need to be surrounded by your own reality anymore. And so mixed reality is going to give you this opportunity to be in these spaces that are completely crazy and completely rework your entire surroundings. But there's the gaming industry has already created these really compelling worlds that people like to spend time in. And so I've had my eye for a long time on kind of gaming universes being used for non-gaming purposes. And this is something that I'm really seeing a lot of in the current moment. So just 2 days ago, I saw there was somebody holding an AI conference, and they're going to be holding it in Animal Crossing in June. And then just this morning, I saw 2 more examples. These came from friends. One of them was, it was a children's book author who was talking about how she started having editorial meetings with her editorial team in Red Dead Redemption 2. So they all get together and they meet at the campfire, and and then they have their editorial board meeting. Every now and then they have to go fight off a raid, but it's okay because it's like a tea break. And then the best example was, and one of my friends actually attended this, it was an Australian couple that got married in Animal Crossing. And so their friends kind of broadcast, hey, there's a wedding going on. And they invited people from all over Animal Crossing to come join the wedding. And so all these goosebumps just thinking about it, all these strangers showed up bringing Animal Crossing gifts to this couple that was getting married in real time in this video game.
Wow.
Anyway, just fantastic. So what's happening? I mean, this is fun stuff, but the significance of this is people are taking real world events and they're now holding them in these parallel universes that are created by the gaming worlds. And this is the beginning. I think we're going to look back in the future and say, this was the beginning when we started digitizing ourselves and started taking our reality into a digital world in a serious way. And so that is hugely positive.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. Thank you for sharing that. Michael, what's your take on all this? And I'd love if you have a comment as well about just the state of hardware availability in the home. I'd love if you have a separate comment on that as well. Would love to get your take on that.
I think it's just a matter of perspective, right? I mean, going along with what I kind of mentioned at the top about the hype cycle, right? I actually think, depending on how you look at it this moment, it's either too early, or what I would prefer to look at it like it is a great moment for a lot of people who never before were thinking along these lines, to think about ways of collaborating virtually in mixed reality. These are all great examples you mentioned about Animal Crossing, especially, and a lot of concerts have been held recently in Fortnite. More and more people doing that. There was like an all-day rave-a-thon in Las Vegas with a bunch of DJs at this festival called Daisy Festival just over this past weekend, because they literally couldn't have it. It's normally an event that has 500,000 people descend on Las Vegas each year, but now they just had sort of the and they were practicing social distancing too. They were all wearing masks, and they had like hosts dancing 6 feet from them. Kind of awkward, but first forays, necessity is the mother of invention. We all know this, right? And I think that this moment is a great one for people to start to habituate thinking along these lines. And I think that, as Leslie was saying, this is just going to accelerate immersive technologies gaining more traction in our lives. And that's really what we're talking about, right? When you think about, I see a question in there. I don't mean to skip ahead. I won't reference specifically, but talking about it, what will it take to make AR succeed? Well, how do you define success? I think, as with all new technologies, with a computer, right? With my mobile phone, with tablets, with everything that we use in our everyday lives, there's a period of acclimation during which you have to see other people using it. Content needs to be produced and added upon and iterated upon. We all need to get comfortable with the idea. What is it good for? What do I want to do in it versus doing another medium? I think that's the thing that people forget a lot about, which is, what do I actually want to put something on my face in order to do? What is worth it or that much better than how I can do it an easier way that's less invasive to my primary sense, my eyeballs, right? That would make me enter this virtual world. It has to be something that I can do significantly better, at least in the context of work or anything that's not just for fun. And even then, right, if I want to play a video game, it has to be a significantly better, more immersive experience that I want to do in VR that I simply couldn't recreate just on a 2D screen. And those things are starting to emerge, and I think more and more people are going to become open to it. I think social distancing is here to stay. I think work at home is here to stay. I also think we are going to be going back into offices because, frankly, some people don't do as well working from home. Some people, it's really hard to motivate. Get out of bed and walk 5 feet. That's not enough mental distance for me to focus, right? You know what I mean? Not me personally. I've been working from home for 3 years. But,
my jokes are just getting old on my kids. I need a fresh audience.
Yeah, exactly. So I think what we're going to have is a more mixed sort of society where there's more of a place for immersive technologies on a daily basis, and that's just going to grow over time. And the next generation that's grown up now, Gen Z, they're going to be much more comfortable with these sorts of things than we are.
Well, so then
I guess I would add
sure.
one more thing to that.
Yeah, go for it.
What they were saying, it's really not about a replacement of what we currently have with AR or VR. It's really an augmentation, and I think more and more we see now that products are being built to be cross-platform. So I don't think anyone is trying to push people to go straight into VR or straight into mixed reality glasses. But really to try to figure out, okay, if I don't have that specific device, either because it's missing or because that's not really what I'm comfortable with, whatever the reason might be, can I also do at least some of that functionality? Is it available to me through web AR, web VR, or mobile AR? And I think we're seeing a lot more of those being built that way. Yeah. We also are trying to build solutions in a way that are cross-platform, so that you're not hindered by the lack of a device, or by trying to push a certain type of functionality that's really truly too complicated to do in VR, and it's much better to just start it or maybe do it in a different medium.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love the way spatial has tackled this problem. That's probably what you're implicitly referring to, Rafaela, where I can dial in from an iPad and I appear as a screen to somebody in VR, right? And I don't get necessarily all the spatial benefits, but it's friction for me to join.
Yeah, we did a project actually with Intercontinental Hotels Group, IHG, and Qualcomm, and that's to visualize, configure, and be able to choose a specific event room. And we built it so that it is cross-platform. You can start it or you can do it, for that matter, in mobile AR, and then you can switch to VR, or you can have multiple people participate in VR mixed reality glasses, while some of the functionality is probably easier to do on the phone, and you can carry it with you anywhere, anytime. So, yeah, it's something we strongly believe in.
That's great. So I guess kind of just building off of kind of that general question around COVID-19's impact on this. Like, has this cracked the nut finally on these technologies that consumers now are seeing it more, I guess, readily available? There's more content, more experiences. So like now's the time that consumers are going out and buying headsets and other equipment so that they can take advantage of it? Or is it still, we're still in a limited audience, and like, let's say in a few months, as things may or may not return to some sense of normal, do we still have a ton of building to do to really get this out the door?
So just really quickly, I think that it's more of a mindset shift for a lot of people around the world, right? It's more of a considering the possibilities. What is the most efficient way for me to have this meeting? Do we all need to go into this office and do it? Does this person have to fly in? Or can we do this in spatial, right? And I think there's going to be more of that thinking. Right now, of course, the supply chains are all broken down, right? It's hard to even manufacture a VR headset, let alone get it shipped and assembled to the States, et cetera. So I don't think that's necessarily happening right now. But I think that will start to happen as things start to work, hopefully, cross your fingers again. The supply chains start to support the production of hardware such as that. And the real thing that's changing is the mindset.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Leslie.
So sorry. Yeah, and that said, though, Amazon was sold out of Oculus Quests there for a while. Yeah, and so people are kind of going for it, but the supply chain is actually not ready for its big moment. And so, but that'll get worked out over time. And what Raffaella was saying about cross-platform, absolutely. It's again, my telco world here. We started off with landlines, and now we're mostly mobile, but there was a good 20 years where everybody had both. And we're probably going to really have, particularly thinking about AR, we're probably going to have phone-based AR for a long time. But to what Michael was saying, if it solves a problem better in this more immersive kind of thing, people will move into the immersion. And for example, just this morning, well, actually, I'm huge with VR fitness, and so my fitness regime right now is I use Supernatural on my Quest for the for the upper body stuff, and then I go and I get on my exercise bike that has a VR sensor from VZ Fit, and they have this spectacular thing where you can type in any address and any destination, well, any origin and any destination, anywhere in the world, and then it will use Google Maps picture photographs to give you a virtual cycle trip through that thing. So this morning I cycled through my town, my old town that I used to live in Finland, and for that kind of thing, right now when we're all like closed in, can't leave our actual houses, to be able to mentally leave our houses. Oh, it is so refreshing. So yeah, so these kinds of things I think are going to pick up, but it's going to take a while again, because not everybody has one of these at home yet. But hey, you listening? If you don't, you should get one.
We're influencing lots of folks to go out and shop today, right? So kind of building on that a little bit, like, what does it take? Maybe I'll start with you, Rafael. What does it take to actually build some of these new experiences? And you've all brought up different examples, which are great, and keep the examples coming, because I think it really helps people understand and what they can and can't do, and so on. I'd love to get a sense from all three of you around, like, okay, how easy or hard is it to do these things? So, like, Michael, you had referenced, the Rave-a-thon, and we've seen virtual car racing, and we've seen, other types of experiences come up. I think Leslie had mentioned, like, the what was it, the virtual Kentucky Derby.
Yes, the virtual Kentucky Derby was mind blowing. Yeah.
So how how easy or hard is that for someone with limited resources to be able to pull something like that off? Or does it take something to be like the Kentucky Derby with millions of dollars? They can do it, and so on. So what's the reality of sort of I think of it as like producing, or the production side of all of these things?
I think it depends on what you're trying to build. If you go back and you think about the early days of building a web page, you could build it on your own, and you might have had tools to do that quickly and fast, or you could spend millions of dollars to do it, depending on the type of functionality and what you had to do with it. We're not exactly quite there yet, but there are tools coming out where you might have a repository of 3D assets that you can reuse to then easily build 3D experiences of some kind. You have other tools. For example, there is one called Virtuoso that lets you take 360 videos and create a presentation that's VR enabled already, so that you can, through a regular PowerPoint, walk people through different environments, and as if you were there, you literally go from slide to slide. So I think on one side, we're seeing that a lot more companies are trying to build tools to make it very fast to build something that I would say is a little bit more simple and basic. On the other side, though, I think that corporations are very much interested in not creating one-offs anymore, but really creating solutions at scale. So if I want to build now commerce or even research, consumer research for my company, how do I do it? How do I think about the entire supply chain to create this type of experiences, from what is the process that I go through to create 3D assets, to make sure that different parts of the organization can access those assets? How do I modify them or make sure that they're as realistic as possible? And then how do I distribute them internally and externally? From simple things like that to things that are a little bit more complicated. So I think we're starting to see things going in two separate ways. Even if you just look at, in a very simplistic terms, how Snap allowed everybody to create AR lenses of their own last year. That's certainly democratizing and opening up building of AR experiences for everyone. And I think they built, they have 600,000 AR lenses, I think, something like that. So it really depends on what you're looking at doing.
Got it. Michael, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a matter of time before you see a WordPress for WebXR and that sort of low code, no code, build XR content sort of environment. A lot of companies working on it now, and I think that, you know, it's going to be, it might actually be, and I've been talking about this for years, the first moment where these sort of like block-based, node-based visual programming experiences can be more efficient and better at producing results than, you know, sort of things written in text, right, in actual code, because it's an inherently spatial platform. And if you can kind of string together nodes in a 3D architecture that builds something, that's potentially more efficient. And I think there's a real opportunity there for a whole cottage industry to be able to work on this. I wouldn't be surprised if we see large players coming out with solutions like this shortly, and offering them as cross-platform tools. And then it's just a matter of making it easy to consume on these sorts of devices and making sure that we have enough of them available for people to consume in the form factors that they will accept. Yeah.
Now, Amazon was trying to do that with Sumerian a couple of years ago.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
It's this way of kind of create a library of 3D assets that people can use and create things. Obviously, within different schemes for how you use them, but that's fine.
Yeah, I was going to just bring up, Rafael, I think that point I think you guys made when we did our prep call the other day, just about the importance of starting to build those 3D assets right now and start thinking that way, whether you're using them all today, but just start kind of moving that direction. Leslie, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, now we don't do this work directly, unlike Rafaela, but we do work very closely with our phone company customers that do. And what I see again and again and again is it's not the technical part that's the difficult part. It's actually the business model and the rights. And so it's the stuff when the lawyers are in the room, that's the hard stuff that actually projects can founder on. And so for example, KDDI, who's one of our customers in Japan, they just had a 5G launch. And of course, you know, the whole reason I talked about 5G earlier is that, you know, having 5G in the headset does make the headset smaller, lighter, et cetera, et cetera. And so we really see that that's the vision going forward. And so most of our customers that are launching 5G commercially, they also are doing kind of experiments in this area, early stuff. And so KDDI partnered with Nreal Glasses to do kind of AR adventures in the Shibuya section of Tokyo. So you put on the glasses and you're, you know, a 5G customer, and you see fish swimming through the air, and you see advertising, virtual advertising on the buildings. And what the KDDI people told me was that building that technically was not a problem at all. Getting the rights for the advertising on the visual space of the building owners, that was the hard part. And so, and particularly because, half the time you go into the meeting with the real estate people and they go, I have no idea what you're talking about. so that's the stuff that and I bet actually, since we mentioned the Kentucky Derby, when the Kentucky Derby didn't happen a couple of weeks ago, NBC instead created a digitized version of the 13 Triple Crown winners all running their each individual winning races of the Kentucky Derby against each other. And it was so amazing. It was so great. But I bet the hard part of that was not actually digitizing the horse races. I bet it was getting the rights for the run for each of those horses. So yeah, so that's where the big rock tends to be that people crash on.
Yeah, and Leslie, going off of that, look at example, for example, at malls. The business of a mall is really, at the end of the day, to provide a space for rent and collect rent. They are looking at, can we actually say that we own the space in the mall and then provide advertising or ways to do advertising, especially in our specific, what we own, and then monetize off of that. So, and they've been thinking about it for a few years. I think now it's starting to finally look like, oh yeah, we're almost there. There is a big difference between even six months from now and now, I think, in the way that people are looking at XR.
Yeah, I agree.
Michael, did you want to add to that at all?
No, I think they covered it. Well, I mean, okay, if I'm going to go down the rabbit hole if I answer it, but I think one of the problems that is very often sort of glossed over is, through what delivery mechanism is that own space presented to a user? You know what I mean? Like if I, for example, have my phone out, right? The architecture is I have to manually open up an app, maybe the Malls app, right? And then it will advertise to me and augment that, right? But what if I open up a different app that the mall has not greenlit and they do a lot of marker-based stuff? Is that illegal? How do you enforce that? And how do you determine what layers appear to a person using that architecture? I think a lot of times what we go to, and this is just because of how we think as humans, I think, is just I put something on my face and then there's layers of things, but that's actually not how the OSs are constructed currently. I think that's an interesting opportunity for OS players going forward, right? To address a spatial sort of computing paradigm where the space is the app and I can walk up to it, and that's controlled in a different way than how we sort of architecturally talk about it today. But I still think there's some problems to solve there at the OS level. And you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, this is one of the things I've really got my eye on, because if you think about the spatial internet, which is the information that's actually held out there in nodes that you access when you're at that location. Right now, we've got the companies that I'm seeing that are working on this. We've got Microsoft, we've got Niantic, we've got Facebook, and we've got Google. And those are four pretty big players. They are not talking about, can you think of more?
Well, I'm just saying they all want to own it themselves.
Right, exactly. And again, looking at kind of, coming from the telco world, SMS did not take off as a thing until it was made interoperable. Until I could send an SMS as a Verizon customer to you over there on AT&T, it didn't take off. And so each one of these, it's like everybody's building their own internet. It's not going to be the spatial internet until they actually are connected. And I wonder if kind of the next big kind of Google of the world in terms of money and power is going to be a company that actually finds a way to unite these different operating systems.
Yeah, and it's not even yes, some are the players that we're mentioning right now, but there are a ton of other companies that are still part of the ecosystem that are trying to maybe look at, hey, can I actually own a piece of that pie or a slice of that pie? What would that mean, and what would I do exactly? The market is definitely not crystallized, and I think that over the next 5 years we'll see huge investments from a bunch of players to really try to own and create a new business of their own. We're actually doing a lot of pure strategy work around that for quite a few of the strategic players to really try to hone that in.
It seems like there's an interesting, just listening to you guys talk about this, I mean, it seems like there is an interesting even opportunity around brands and people that have brands that as they do create these like digital objects or 3D objects for products that end up having to show up in these spatial worlds, that there's a licensing play for them into these worlds that's kind of unique and interesting. That now you're I'm building whatever corn pops or frosted flakes for the real world and for the virtual world, and what are the how are they used in both, and how you marketed them in both. I mean, it becomes really fascinating, kind of the business challenge and opportunity there. Yeah, Leslie, were you going to add to that?
No, that's fine. I was going to, yeah. No, we're good.
Oh, okay. Hey, so Leslie, I did want to ask you, just in general, because we talked about this the other day, but like maybe you can give us a quick comment on sort of the state of internet bandwidth and so on. We kind of touched on this, like I think I mentioned, like in my household, I have 2 kids and a wife, and the kids are on Netflix streaming, 24/7, and I'm trying to do panels and things like this, and my wife's doing her Zoom sessions. So like we're just like eating up bandwidth left and right. Can you give us the state of bandwidth and kind of how things like XR are impacting it and its throughput and capacity and so on?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm a trend scout, and so the stuff that I'm looking at is new things that are happening all over the place. And until the COVID moment struck, the news that I was getting from the telecommunications industry is, oh, we're working on all this IoT and 5G and all this kind of stuff. Since COVID, it's all like, oh my God, we've discovered these giant holes in our network. We don't have enough fiber everywhere, so we got to backfill with fiber. And this is what's happening everywhere in the world. It's governments. Italy, Chile, and New Zealand just in the last week have all said, we now need to really make sure that we have, and particularly connecting students. We need to make sure that all of our schools are connected with broadband and et cetera. So what this has done is shown a giant spotlight on holes in the network, and everybody's kind of dropped the advanced projects they were working on and going, okay, all right, you caught us without any underwear. We need to put some underwear on first. So that's really kind of what's happening in the telecommunications industry. The good news is, in a general way, because we run lots of networks all over the world, and we can see this. Most networks are holding up well, even with all kinds of we're getting massive amounts of traffic, and it's not just peaking in the evening like it used to, but it's peaking all day long. Okay, the networks are fine, except for the fact that except for the location holes that I was talking about. But we're actually using capacity that was supposed to be capacity to hold everybody for the next 10 years, and it's getting used now. So
wow.
Yeah, I think we're going to see phone companies making a lot more. Well, and this is actually, again, I think this is ultimately going to speed the adoption of 5G once people stop burning down base stations, because 5G actually carries a huge amount of traffic at very low cost, and so that's actually going to be the thing that actually helps us get all of the connection that we need for all this great stuff.
Yeah. So, I guess what other things, along those lines, have to come to place to really, help us get this adopted? I know there's kind of a few questions in the chat about, kind of related to hardware and so on. Michael, what do you see, needs to be done to, enable this to come to life even in a bigger way? I mean, obviously the network infrastructure and so on that we just talked about, some of the processing, creating content, but what else is needed on that hardware front?
On the hardware front, I think things need to just continue progressing the way they are. I'm one of these few sort of, I don't want to say like contrarians, but in this area, I kind of am. I think we're on the right path, and I think things are speeding along very well. I understand people who are in businesses that rise and fall with the hype cycle of XR, but I mean, looking at this thing alone, this is one piece of hardware. And when it launched, it was vastly different than it is now. Now, starting, I think, next month or maybe next week, they're starting to ship apps with hand tracking. So you don't even need a controller anymore, third-party applications. That's something that, this is running on a 3-year-old Qualcomm processor, right? And it's amazing but just a little bit of software innovation that's done. Now, this is the first sort of all-in-one device that you can point to that is just sort of plug and play. You put it on your face and you play.
And just to be clear, you're talking about your Oculus Quest. Just want
Yes, I'm
to
sorry.
make sure that's clear. Yeah.
This is an Oculus Quest. It's a standalone, all-in-one, 6 degree of freedom VR device. I shouldn't assume everybody knows what it is. Thank you. And it comes with these touch controllers that are also tracked in 3D space. It's the most advanced non-PC requiring VR device that I think most people are aware of. There are a lot of other sort of knockoff headsets, and not even knockoff headsets, competitors produced by HTC. But this is kind of setting the standard just because of the support that Facebook and by extension Oculus are putting behind it on the innovation front. And I think that, everyone is aware things need to get thinner, lighter, cheaper, faster, more ergonomic, etc. And I think that the whole industry is racing towards that eventual outcome. And I think we're going to see it sooner rather than later from some of the major players. And I actually am very optimistic about that. I think the real thing is, if there's a silver lining in COVID-19, along the lines of what I was saying earlier, it's the worldwide mindset shift.
Yeah.
And being more tolerant towards these sorts of things, from being like, well, this is, no one's ever going to really, I don't understand, to, well, I could see some scenarios in which I might. And then when the hardware and the content gets there, I think we're just sort of charging along as fast as Moore's Law will let us, basically.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely, I think that point about the mindset shift is so critical, because like before, we would all, I know, my friends would never go out and buy this kind of equipment and stuff, because it's like, I want to go outside and be with people. I don't want to be stuck at home, watching this stuff. And it's like, you're stuck at home now. Good time to perhaps invest in this stuff, this equipment. So I do think that mindset has really helped a lot of folks.
And I think if we think outside of gaming and entertainment, what's another interesting thing that some of us may not like as much as others. I'm personally someone who's been blessed to travel almost constantly for the past decade and a half, and now I'm not traveling. And I think there's a lot of companies that are going to take a hard look at their bottom line and say, look, we're saving so much money. I mean, you see all these tech companies, they're like, you can work from home forever. Twitter just
yeah,
realistic of them, right? But now they might start to consider a meeting in spatial, right, Rafaela, as opposed to flying to Florida to have a client meeting. And some of us may like that less than others. Some of us like traveling, but it's going to be more efficient, and there will be more use cases that will be maybe even mandated going forward as we lean into this sort of mixed reality, remote virtual work environment.
Yeah. Well, and maybe Rafael and Leslie, you guys can comment on this too, because I think you guys brought it up last week when we were prepping, was around how Hollywood is really looking at how to use these kind of technologies now, and sort of if you get sort of that engine behind this, I think, and you're creating high quality premium content for the masses. I mean, I think that gives you a huge boost of momentum behind this that people tap into.
Yeah, I think they're forced now to produce things differently, and the Unreal Engine. There are two major engines to build XR, AR, VR type of experiences. There's Unity and Unreal. Unreal is usually being used for things that are a little bit heavier. I think Hollywood had already been embracing it quite a bit, but I think it's becoming more and more a little bit the norm. It has to be, to make sure that you can do things virtually a little bit more, and you don't have to shoot on location or with people there as much. And then I'm not an engineer, so I can only speak so much about it.
Leslie, did you want to add to that? Oh, sorry, Michael, go ahead.
Well, just really quickly, in sports as well. Obviously, you have the virtual races that have been discussed. But if I'm a big NBA guy. I just finished watching The Last Dance. Shout out to The Last Dance, greatest sports documentary ever. But as we're thinking about, there's so much financial pressure. First of all, the players' contracts coming up next year, they're going to make a lot less money if they don't finish out the season, which has been suspended. And they're considering fanless, tournament style, maybe all in one location play to finish out the season and crown some sort of a champion, but without any fans in the stands, without any audience. And what's going to be the best way to experience those events? It's probably putting on a headset and watching it live in 360-degree video. And I think that's just going to spur more innovation in the sports and entertainment arena, as well as traditional Hollywood.
one example, because it was actually shown up. It was shown last year at CES.
Uh-oh.
Oh, she's
I
gone
think we lost
altogether.
her.
Okay, yeah. So it's
Well,
and
I was
another.
just going to mention. Oh, go ahead, Leslie.
No,
Go ahead.
oh, okay. No. Sorry, if you were going to build on Michael.
I was just going to make one quick comment about what Michael brought up, especially around sports, is that I think getting into this kind of immersive experience also gives you the ability to capture all the audio from all those consumers and then pipe it back into the stadiums, because I think that's one of the missing things in a lot of these things, whether you're watching comedy or you're watching sports or music. It's the feedback, right? It's weird to you don't develop that same energy that when you're playing music and live in front of an audience, right? You feel the energy coming back at you, and playing in front of a camera all by yourself or with your band, you don't get that same energy and rhythm going. And so I think by taking advantage of these platforms, and you can harness that kind of consumer feedback and pipe it back in, I think is so critical for the sports stars, the artists, the musicians, and so on.
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead,
because we just saw Apple buy just last week. I forgot the name of the company, but yeah, it's a 360 sports streaming company. But I think another key thing here is the fact that VR, where VR really touches us, is emotions, and so the ability to create emotion or to create content that really touches your emotions. Like I just finished 2 nights ago playing Moss, the VR game, and by the end of that game, you have bonded with Quill the mouse so tightly that okay, I'm done playing the game, but I want to hang out with Quill more. What do I do with myself now? And so content that actually creates that really strong emotional link, that I think is going to be something that really drives people into VR to and especially now when so many emotional outlets for us are curtailed. I think that's another good angle that actually VR can use to get itself going.
I just want to say one thing about the comment about, since we're sort of touching on music and immersive experiences, emotional experiences, from Nona Hendricks, who was mentioning about interested in haptic and AR, VR. I think one of the interesting things that's now being discussed, and I forget, I read it on Road to VR, which is a website that curates some content for me. I get a newsletter from them every day. It was about head-based haptics. And at first I thought, that's insane. No one will ever go for that. But I was thinking, when I play video games and I'm using a controller, it has haptics in my hand. It could actually add, if it's done safely, and that's obviously the it could actually add a new dimension of if I'm passing through a cloud of dust or any sort of effect, you can have really advanced haptics to make it feel like it's just that much more immersive. And I could imagine that playing a role in concerts at key moments, could mimic bass, for example, or add to it, or any number of other things. Anyway.
Hey, Michael, you can test it first.
Yeah, I'll test it first.
Back to the question on will it kill you? You see if it'll kill us first. Well, hey guys, I know we're kind of coming to the end of the hour here. I think we've had a great discussion. I just want to ask one more really quick question before we start our wrap up here. Just because I'm a data geek at heart, and so I love understanding metrics and so on, and looking at what data really impacts things. How do you guys look at data as it relates to this? And what data points are really interesting for you as part of understanding either the adoption, the consumer experiences, et cetera? So how do you guys view and hey, she's back and with video. All right. So what are interesting metrics that you guys care about and follow as it relates to this space? Anything? Or are we just not there yet?
Perspective of adoption or trends, or what do you mean?
Or even just consumer feedback, and ultimately it's can you compute an ROI on the investment into this, and so on? Anything? Yeah, that's I figured. Got it.
Yeah, I mean, just basic headset penetration rates. That's a starting point. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, I mean,
I missed,
go ahead, Rafael.
I missed a question, but from our perspective, if I got it correctly, we try to calculate ROI on everything and make sure that that's one point of one data point that we use to determine what to do or what not to do, and our clients as well.
Just touching on that real quickly, what is the ROI that most folks are looking for? Is it a financial return, or is it just like adoption, number of consumers who have used something?
From a content creator's perspective, I think what's important to signal, which by the way, Facebook has just done, they've released, Leslie, you may have these numbers, or Rafaela more at hand than I do, but they just released that there were a bunch of people that made, as independent indie developers, really, made over $1 million on the Oculus Quest platform alone. I think signaling things.
Over 100 companies have now made more than $1 million in VR applications. Yeah, not just the Quest, but just across the whole platform.
Okay. Yeah, so that's something that I think boosts confidence in people who want to produce content for XR and needs to continue to be built upon. These success stories need to get out there. Then they can point to it when they talk to investors. Look, here are the trends. Here's where things are going. We can make money.
Well, hey guys, unfortunately it's already 2:00 here on the West Coast, and so we're unfortunately out of time. This has been a great discussion. Hopefully the audience has appreciated all the insights and so on that we've provided and so on. And I just want to thank all three of you again for spending your afternoon here helping me out and talking about such a fun topic. And I made a ton of notes of all the new things I need to go check out, from the Kentucky Derby races to the Rave-a-thon and so on. So I just want to thank you guys all one more time, and I'm sure if folks are out there and are interested in other digital Hollywood panels, Victor's got a great slate throughout the week, so I'd encourage you all to take a look at other sessions that he has coming along. And I just want to thank everyone once again. So thank you guys all so much, and have a great one, and thanks to the audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.